Welcome to another episode of the YXE Sports Podcast for the week of October the 18th. Of course, we are back after a few-week hiatus, and of course, we are live at Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar in Saskatoon, as we are every single Monday. Of course, thanks to everybody that's watching on the YXE Sports Podcast Facebook page, on the Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar Facebook page. We are on YouTube, and we are also on Twitter, so that's a new format that we're able to populate too, is Twitter. So a big thanks to everybody for tuning in. With me today, very special guest sitting to my left, the head coach of the University of Saskatchewan Men's Soccer Program, Bryce Chapman. Joined the Huskies in 2017, named the first ever full-time head coach in history. You and I were talking a little bit before the show, and you were saying that it's 17 years this week, or next week, or something like that you've been here. Time flies, hey?
Hey, it's gone quick. To be honest, it's a landmark. My daughter turned 17. She came 7 weeks early on my wife and I back in 2004 and kicked off my head coaching career with a bang.
Well, there you go, right? No time to jump right in it, right? With, a newborn and all these duties and things like that. First of all, thanks for coming down. Thanks for joining us. And the question that you're probably sick of answering, but how good is it to be back for you coaching soccer, but just to be back coaching soccer, and super exciting for the kids, the student athletes that get back out there and play soccer. But just what has this season been like after not playing last year?
Yeah, to be honest, this has been a whirlwind. I think after 20 months, both the players, coaching staff, we were just ready to get back at our regular routines. And that was kind of the biggest challenge when the world was hit with COVID, and so many things were taken away from everyone's day-to-day life. But for athletes and coaches, when you have that routine, you have that group of players that you see on a daily basis, it was a big adjustment. And to get back at it this fall, it's been really exciting. We've got a great group of guys, and we're pushing along during the season.
And we'll get into the state of this particular season in just a little bit, but how did you and your players stay engaged in 2020? What were some of the adjustments? Obviously, you guys couldn't play, but what kind of adjustments did you guys have to make? I know a lot of coaches were doing Zoom meetings and that sort of thing, but what was it like for the Husky Men's Soccer Program to stay engaged throughout the canceled season of 2020?
I think that was the biggest challenge because there's no playbook.
Yeah, yep.
Things were changing week by week. We took into account a number of different things with our team. We had a plan that when we do return, whatever date that was going to be, that we were going to be ready. So a lot of the weight fell on the coaches, but also our leadership group, who did a really good job keeping all the guys connected, whether it was on Snapchat or group chats. They kept the group and their peers connected. And then as coaches, we did weekly check-ins. We did a little bit of Zoom, but we really wanted to be aware of what those student athletes were doing, because everything they were doing in class was on Zoom. So we didn't want to overburden them and put them in front of a screen too much. And then our strength and conditioning coaches, whenever we had a chance to reconnect, we did. But we just really tried to make sure those athletes and students were in the best hands possible, and they had as many resources as possible to stay in the right frame of mind. It's been a long 20 months for anyone, and we just wanted to make sure we took care of them as human beings first, and make sure that second piece of being ready for whenever the season was going to start was second piece.
Well, athletes and creatures, just the sporting world, they're all, creatures of habit, right? So, you go from 2020 not playing at all, getting out of the norm, doing all these things that you're not used to. Has anything changed this year? We talked about how you guys have had a couple of road trips this season, and nothing really in that term has changed. So has anything from your preparation, from the way that you guys travel, the way that you guys prepare, has any of that changed under this COVID world, or is it kind of right back to how it's always been in terms of that?
Yeah, I don't think we're back to where it's always been. I think this year's probably been the deepest year, in the sense that we've had to kind of go back a few steps, get back to some regular routines, some regular habits. There's been a lot of teaching and reteaching, because 20 months, that's a long period of time. The game continued to evolve, and players came in at different stages of preparation. And that's been kind of the biggest thing, is just reteaching and getting back to those regular habits and behaviors. And And then there's always the, oh, I forgot what it feels like, you know. We've been on 2 road trips, both very different opponents, but the players experiencing that away from home, in a hotel. Obviously, there's more COVID restrictions and ways of doing things. And then just feeling that pressure of competing again. And that's kind of been the biggest thing in the last 2 weeks is for 20 months, not a lot of people felt pressure when it came to that competitive moment in a game. And now those players are relearning how that feels to be in a tight game. Those players are learning what it feels like to look at the standings and seeing teams move and forward and move back and just getting back to those emotional roller coasters that sport bring.
Right. The key to any success at the university level, of course, is recruiting, right? The players that you bring in, the student athletes that you bring in. How has that changed, throughout COVID, if at all? I'm not sure what your regular scouting, or recruitment routine is, but with players that you're trying to recruit not having played last year either, I wouldn't imagine. How has that kind of changed the way that you look for talent and try to recruit?
Yeah, I think that side of the game, I think it's actually helped us to take a step back and look at how we did our business when it came to recruiting. And the one thing COVID presented is we really had to rely on conversations with coaches, with the players, with the families, and really had to get to know them because either those players didn't have up-to-date footage of how they played and who they were. So we really had to balance that standard of play, but also who are they as people. And I think that's something we can come out and be better at and do more of those interviews. And one prime example is we brought a player in from Germany this year, our first international, and I got to know the family via Zoom, got to know him, and that was a really good experience of how do we get to know this player. We know the quality he's bringing coming out of U19 Bundesliga, but is he the right fit? And so far everything's worked out really well, but it took us to a different comfort zone, different level of recruiting.
Now, under normal circumstances, obviously we all know what recruiting used to be like to recruit kids in the city, right? It's easy as driving to wherever and watching them. 15 Saskatoon-born players on the 2021 roster, but just under normal circumstances, how do you go about recruiting out of province? I'm assuming that, in a non-COVID world, even if you are trying to get a player from overseas, Germany or wherever, you're probably going to have to do that online. But, recruiting kids from BC or Alberta, how have you kind of gone about that in the past?
I think there's a couple pieces to it. Obviously, we're looking to put the best program possible on the field and chase another Canada West title. Get ourselves back into a national tournament. That's the standard. That's what we're always shooting for. So, we look at some of the top programs across the country, whether it's Cape Breton on the east side or whether it's UBC and Thompson Rivers on the west. You got Carleton and York in the middle. Looking for those top players is now becoming not just a local landscape, but it's going right across the country. And it's going right across the world. International students are really seeing the value of coming to Canada. A fantastic education, CPL rules allow them to pursue both professional and academic opportunities. So we're covering a lot of ground, looking for the right student athlete to keep us moving forward and putting ourselves in positions to go after Canada West and go after youth sport.
You've reached the Canada West final 4 times. You had a Canada West title, the first ever Canada West title for Huskies Mens Soccer in 2014-15. Is it fair to say that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is it fair to say that that's probably the best accomplishment that you have as the head coach or part of the coaching staff for the Huskies? And what do you remember of that 2014-15 season that was so special?
Yeah, probably that group of players were a special group of players. Coaching staff, everyone involved was just a really good group of people, and they've gone on to be very successful in a number of different pieces. But if we go back to recruiting, that 2014 team, I believe we were 26 out of 28 were Saskatchewan-based players. So, winning that title obviously was a massive accomplishment for those kids and the program, but I thought that really put a stamp on what potential our province has. And that we played U of A in the final of Canada West at our house, and I think we were 900 people in the stands, and you could see so many different people that had influenced my career, influenced those players' career, whether they're club head coaches, family members, and that was kind of the picture that really sits in my mind. And it was a great testament to that group of guys. They're fantastic. They all stay in touch. I think they're all close friends as their families and careers grow, and they still keep in touch with our program, which is pretty special as well.
Of course, a reminder from Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar to drop your questions in the comment section below. You mentioned the homegrown talent from that 2014 team. You're the head coach and director of soccer ops for the Saskatchewan Summer Soccer Series. Mm-hmm. What is kind of that all about, and what importance does that serve to soccer players here in the province?
Well, I think CPL is a big piece to our game right across the country. There's been a missing void for many years with not having pro soccer in Canada. And if you look at our national team, both men's and women's, there's a massive buzz in the soccer community, and there's people that have never watched soccer starting to follow our national team trying to qualify for 2022. So having CPL, I think, is a big piece to the game as a growth, but it's something that I think we always have to be careful of, and make sure it's done right, make sure the steps are put in place, make sure the foundation's put in place, and the former ownership group, they were doing a lot of really good things in doing that, and hopefully the next group that has a potential franchise in Saskatoon puts those important pieces in place as well.
Would you ever foresee a time that soccer, the need for soccer or the demand for soccer, the interest of soccer, could potentially pit a Regina and Saskatoon team? How do you see it playing out, in kind of that scenario?
Yeah, personally, I don't think that's a realistic piece. I think to do it right, we have to go after one franchise in one city, whether it's Regina or whether it's Saskatoon, and make sure we get the province behind it. I think if we look at so many different sporting groups across the province, Saskatchewan Roughriders, that's Saskatchewan. Yep. And people travel all four corners of our province to go see that game. It's important to make sure we have a solid franchise in our province before we start thinking about duplicating it, because there's so many pieces, and I think soccer in Saskatchewan is still young. I think it's got the numbers, but it's very recreational mindset, and that's why the importance of having CPL is key, because it's going to help grow that game, but it's going to take a number of years for the culture to become very professional driven, and for families and players to understand what it is to be a pro, not just play pro. Yeah. And I think those variables are two very different variables.
Right. So if you could just, with a snap of a finger, get soccer to the popularity that you want it to be in Saskatchewan, in your mind, somebody that's well connected, somebody that's been around the game for your entire life, what are kind of the steps that need to be taken? Does it start at like a grassroots level type of thing and then build up? But how do we get that popularity of soccer to its full potential?
We have the grassroots in place.
Yeah.
I think all the different soccer bodies have done a really good job over the years building the sport from that bottom up. But if we look at Saskatoon, and if the CPL franchise was going to be in Saskatoon, we need all different types of people watching the game and being excited about the game, and the opportunities to cross promote, whether it's with the Blades or whether it's with the university programs. The more arms you have involved in our community, selling the game, selling the local talent. You look at a Brett Levi, a Thomas Hassel, who's playing with the Vancouver Whitecaps. We need those type of role models to be cornerstones of our future CPL franchise. And
of course, Brett Levi is with Valior FC, I do believe, right? Yep. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, that's what I saw this morning. Of course, we are live at Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar, as we are every single Monday, and it's all soccer on this week's episode of the YXE Sports Podcast. However, there's football on the big screens here, and every NFL game, whether it's Thursday night, whether it's Sunday, whether it's Monday night, come on down to Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar for food and drink specials, and of course the Super Bowl squares that are being sold. Money's going to a good cause there as well, so make sure to come on down to Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar for all your football watching needs, right on the corner of Circle and Idlewild in Saskatoon. Bryce Chapman, thanks so much for being with us today. Let's talk a little bit about the current state of Husky soccer. So we talked a little bit earlier about how awesome it is to be back. Why don't you just give us a little rundown of the season so far for your group?
Yeah, I thought, preseason was a long preseason. I think we were 6 weeks for preseason, which is about 7-9 days earlier than normal. But the guys came in with a great attitude. We've got a really good group of kids, not just for this year, but for the next couple cycles coming through. Started off the season quite well, starting 3-1 in the first 4, and then things have gotten tougher as the schedule has gone. Came up against UFC 2 weekends ago, who are undefeated, and dropped some points there, and dropped some points this past weekend. But have us sitting in a good spot heading into the final weekend against U of A, and want to continue pushing toward playoffs.
So that game is in Edmonton on Friday, and then you're back at home on Sunday for the Bateman Cup.
Yep.
Right, which is the series between the Alberta and the Huskies, the Alberta Golden Bears and the Saskatchewan Huskies. But why don't you give our listeners and our viewers a little bit of an idea of what the Bateman Cup is and the importance of it?
Yeah, not a lot of people realize that. I think it was 1911. The Huskies, the University of Saskatchewan had a team of students, jumped on the train, went to U of A and played the first inter-university match with Saskatchewan winning 1-0. So David DeBay, when he was with the Husky Board of Trustees, created the Bateman Cup. And every home game at U of S against the U of A, you're playing for a cup. And it's exciting for the boys. We go down to the end of University Bridge, recognize the memorial of all the former footballers that fought in the war for us over back in the day. And it's really important for them to understand that it's not just about the day they live in, but all the people before us, whether it was alumni or whether it's veterans that fought for our country. And it just brings a bit of education for these young kids and a bit of excitement on that final day. It'll be a big weekend. Silly
question alert, because again, I know what your answer is going to be, but we kind of talked about how you guys have set yourself up to have success, hopefully, over the course of the next few seasons. And like I said, I feel like I know what your answer to this question is going to be, but long term, what are the goals of the Husky soccer program, the men's program?
Well, I think we speak about it every year, and we just finished speaking about it this year, is you always want to put yourself in opportunities. Yeah. And, you can talk about we want to win a national title. That's our ultimate goal. We want to win a Canada West title. That's the ultimate goal. But every year we have to make sure we're putting ourselves in a good spot to have that chance. So making sure we're in playoffs, making sure we're getting into Final Fours, and then at least you're putting yourself in that realistic opportunity to win those important matches. And sport's a fantastic world to be in, but it can be a cruel world too, right?
Well, especially when everything goes against you, right? You're not getting the bounces, you're doing everything right, and for whatever reason, things don't go your way. That's how I golf. I feel like I'm doing everything right, and nothing seems to go my way. So hopefully you are a golfer. If you're not, you're going to be a golfer now, because those are courtesy of Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar. So
my son will probably steal these, so
well,
it's all good.
Hey, so. I'm sure it's funny because I take these out to the golf course too, and my buddies that are golfing either in the foursome behind me or a few hours later or whatever, when they're looking for their ball in the bush, they seem to find the Wendell's ball, and they let me know that it was definitely mine that was in there. But thanks so much for coming down. Huskies, of course, at home on Sunday. They're on the road in Edmonton on Friday, and then Sunday at home for the Bateman Cup against the University of Alberta Golden Bears. Bryce Chapman, the head coach of the men's soccer program at the University of Saskatchewan. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, that wraps it up for another episode of the YXE Sports Podcast, and we are going to be back next Monday with a new episode of the YXE Sports Podcast. So until then, stay safe.